In 1959, a book of poetry was published in Canada called A Red Carpet for the Sun. On the cover, the author's face, and a dark, probing gaze that seemed designed both to challenge and intimidate the reader. The poet's name was Irving Layton.
You redeem yourself at least by fighting against the darkness. You at least carry a small flicker of light, a splinter of the sun in your own soul.
Irving Layton would bestride the literary scene like a colossus for decades to come, as prophet, clown, and gadfly to Canadian society, and as an inspiration to all those who believed in the power of the word and the word's importance in shaping a nation's life.
No whining and no kvetching and no complaining. This is what it is.
But who was he really? And where did he come from? Spry and drugged with love, he wrote late in life, I pole vault over my grave. Athlete, chameleon, and conjurer, one of his greatest creative accomplishments was himself. The year is 1913, and with Europe on the brink of war, thousands of Jewish immigrants are heading for the New World in search of freedom and a better life. Among them, Kana and Moishe Lazarovich and their family, who have left their small town in Romania and have set sail for Montreal, where they will settle in the burgeoning, Yiddish-speaking neighborhood squeezed in between the city's French and English populations. 8 children, 3 girls and 5 boys. The youngest, Israel Lazarovich, is only 1 year old, and he will prove to be unlike the others. In time, he will change his name to Irving Layton. But for now, he's just a feisty kid in a crowded immigrant household.
We lived in a very small house on St. Elizabeth Street. The house had only 4 rooms, but 1 room had to be converted into a grocery store to provide us with a living. That was my mother's dominion. The bedroom became my father's tabernacle. In the daytime, that was my father's tabernacle. It was a holy place.
And I guess the term I can use for my father was that he was a religious fanatic. He was way beyond the pale of any sanity.
Hyman Latch, Irving's older brother, has lived in California for many years. He remembers his father as a man who never really adjusted to his adopted country.
He was living for the hereafter. Very impractical man, but a good man.
Kana, or Clara Lazarovich, was made of sterner stuff. Tough, pragmatic, and at times fearsome.
I have said somewhere that I owe my impeccable sense of rhythm to my mother's cursing.
May you go upon such hour that you shouldn't return. And mother, I want to eat. May the worms eat you.
My father was nothing like that at all. A very quiet, unassuming man, as dark and as quiet as the shadow on the wall.
While Irving's father communed with God, his mother braved the city's markets, haggling for food to sell to the neighbors and make ends meet. Life was hard, but for young Irving, even an icy floor became a source of fun.
The bedroom used to be called the North Pole. We didn't have a stove to warm the bed, so we called the bedroom North Pole. And one of my earliest and most delicious memories is of sliding from the kitchen door, the door that separated the bedroom from the kitchen, sliding after I'd opened the door right into the bed. And I would grab the coverlet and I would put myself in there with my cat. And I would leave my cat there to warm up a small area for myself. Then, After I and the cat had warmed up an even larger segment of the bed, my mother would come. And by then, of course, there was a nice large segment of warmth for my mother's body.
But Layton's earliest memory was far more traumatic. He was a small child, it was after dark, and there was no electricity.
I had to go to the washroom, and I had a candle, and I was wearing my night shift. I was attracted by the flame of the candle, and I know something said to me, "My, wouldn't it be wonderful if you made a bigger flame?" And of course, I made of myself a torch, and for a while, I know I watched with absolute delight and wonder until, of course, the heat became too intense for me and painful, and my first anguished poetic cry was heard in the house, and my mother and sisters came rushing to see what had happened.
And his mother took care of him, just unbelievable. She really nursed him, put Vaseline on him. That was the treatment. We didn't go to a hospital. We didn't hear him, just, and he has a wound right now, and he can't lift his hand. Yeah, it was a very bad time. But it gave him an opportunity to read.
Irving was drawn to books and read voraciously from an early age. But he got little in the way of encouragement from his family.
I can easily claim that I appreciate what he did more than anybody else in this universe, because it was grim. There was hardly, as a matter of fact, the better he was, the worse it was for him. It's cruel, misery. If he showed any aptitude for something, say, "Oh, bravo, bravo, oh, beautiful, marvelous, grace, my, Gay Arbiton." That must have hurt.
Was he an unhappy kid?
No, he was not unhappy. First of all, he got a lot of love from the whores. That sounds funny, but that's the way it is.
Strapped for funds, the Lazarovich family had been forced to sublet the upstairs.
The tenants that moved in were very friendly people. Lots of friends, a lot of wonderful people. Policemen, firemen, Navy, Army, and they were going up and down. And it became very obvious, not to me, but it was a whorehouse. So directly upstairs was a whorehouse, and below were 4 people, and my father would be praying in the back room, very fervently. He was a very religious man. And upstairs, and that's my story, and upstairs, somebody for a quarter was already reaching heaven.
Meanwhile, the young Irving was reaching out in a different way.
He started to write poetry when he was about 13. Why? I know for sure that he was already reading Barrett. I even if you wish, you can hear this. "I go wherever so I flee, there's not an eye will weep for me. There's not a kind congenial heart where I can claim the meanest part. And you, has my hopes undone, will not sigh, although I love but one." Now, I remember that poem. That this is the age of about 11. And this is what he would do in that stinking little home, that little house. He'd go up and down like my father would go praying, davening. He would go on reciting poetry. And nobody paid attention to it. He's a miracle, because there was no reason why he would emerge the way he did. He not only didn't get any encouragement, he got abuse. Go to work, gay Arbeiten. You never amount to anything, you're a bum.
I can't contradict his brother, because I wasn't there.
Seymour Main, poet and scholar, was Irving Layton's pupil in high school and is a longtime friend.
But there must have been underneath the rough exterior that his mother seemed to exhibit day to day in order to survive, complaining, cursing, This is her way to deal with the world. I mean, the world was tough and hard on her, so the way she had her expressions. I think underneath it all, she must have communicated to Irving some sense that, I love you, Boychik. You know, you're important to me. You're the apple of my eye, and you're gonna do something special. You're special. And Irving got the sense, you're special. And Irving carried that sense of being special all his life.
She must have given him something that she didn't to all the other kids. This is obvious. Because he did feel loved, with all the contradictions there. He's the first one to say that she cursed him when he was going out of the house, but there was something stronger than the curses.
My father's coffin pointed me to this. O arrogant with new life, his black beard, fierce and stiff, and partner to the dark wood.
Your husband died. That's the way we got the information. He was sent from the Montreal hospital, and opened the door, and he was French Canadian. And we opened the door, and Irving writes about that. And, well, very dramatic. And everybody started to cry, including my mother.
Irving's father died in 1921. This shadow on the wall was now only the memory of a shadow, and the family began to disperse. Kana remarried and moved out of the neighborhood. Irving's brothers were shipped off to find work in New York City. And Irving, now out of school, was cast adrift, with the expectation that he would join the workforce. But he had other ideas.
If ever a man deserved credit and applause, this guy does, just the way he got to high school. He had to pay $4 a month to go to high school. To come back for just a second, that knocked me out. I never was able to get the $4.
No one wanted to pay the $4 for Irving to go to school either. And so young Irving, on his own initiative, paid a visit to the Jewish social agency, the Baron de Hirsch Institute, and told them his story.
And they called my mother. Well, shame him to the pieces. Your boy wants to leave him alone. He has no place to eat, no place to sleep. And you living up there in Westmount. And then my sister began to pay $4, and my mother brought him down food where he rented the room. It changed the whole scenery. Now, that's a gutsy kid.
And in high school, I was aware of him very much because he was the bad boy, you know. From the point of view of being odd, he was slumped around and he said what he thought. And he used to write me, when we became acquainted, he used to write me long letters in green ink, double foolscap, and they were always I, you know. And once I answered and I said, you know, Irving, from your letters with all about you all the time, I get the feeling that you're very arrogant. And he answered, another long letter, P.S. When I look at, you call me arrogant. When I look at the people around me, I marvel that I am so modest.
Layton graduated from high school right into the Depression. Out of work, he spent some time with his older brothers in New York. But it wasn't all fun.
For a cent, you had a cup of coffee. For 1 cent, you had some packed wheat. And for another cent, you had some sugar. 3 cents. And that's how we ate. Yeah. And I'm not kidding you. We're lucky to have the 3 cents.
Hard times and ominous political developments overseas were turning young people increasingly towards left-wing movements, from socialism to communism. Layton was no exception.
He was a member of what he called YPSL, the Young Socialist League. And that's where he came across David Lewis. And he had a girlfriend at the time who was Suzanne Rosenberg.
It got started with a woman that's in the picture there that went back to Russia. She had a big influence on him.
Politics and romance made for a heady cocktail. But it was politics itself that was to come between Layton and his beloved.
Irving and his girlfriend made a decision that they would go off and build socialism in Russia. His girlfriend, Suzanne, left first. Irving's plan was he was going to join his girlfriend in Russia very, very shortly. She started writing letters. Irving never received the letters. The mother intercepted them because the mother was wise and smart, and she wasn't going to lose her son to Stalin's Russia. And Irving lost touch with Suzanne Rosenberg. The consequence of his first great love was the woman disappears to Stalinist Russia.
Although he was left behind in Canada, Layton remained politically involved and spent a lot of time talking politics in Horn's cafeteria.
It was a restaurant where all the Reds met. And a cup of coffee was divided among three of us. We had a nickel, we'd go to Horn's, we'd take one cup of coffee, Larry would take a sip, Irving would take a sip, I take a sip, nickel.
Hyman was now back from New York, broke, and Larry too. And the three brothers were partners in adversity. Then Irving, as was his wont, got a bright idea.
Irving, in his usual bombastic way, he said, you know, I got the answer. In a time like this, the answer is marriage. We have to get married to somebody with money. And we are eligible. We're all good looking, presentable, and we can get the best. And listen, we might find somebody with money that is compatible. How do you tell a story like that, even on television? And who would believe it? But it happens to be true. And who would further believe that we're so desperate that we're willing to forego our life, get married? It's just so that we can have something to eat. And it's incredible. And we're talking about a Jewish heart.
Irving did marry a girl with a Jewish heart. Her name was Fay Lynch, but the marriage was a disaster. When Irving enlisted in the army, it was not just to fight for democracy, but also to put some distance between himself and his wife.
Lie down beside her, soldier, and do but use her well, and she can ease your passion with cries and powder smell. Be reckless in your loving. Her grace makes no one poor, for only bullets issue from such an iron whore.
Despite the fact that Irving, who was an officer, and Hyman, who was a plain soldier, we still won the war. An officer was 10 times worse than I was. He was a mess. They got wise to him, and they were so glad they got rid of him, they gave him an honorable discharge. But it saved his life.
And as fate would have it, as soon as he got discharged, ended up back in Montreal, didn't want to go back to Halifax, didn't want to go back to Fay. So I think through one person or another, he happened to meet Betty Sutherland. And from that meeting of Betty Sutherland, that led him right, I mean, it looked as if some master scriptwriter had written Irving's life.
Betty and Irving married. Irving completed his master's degree at McGill. And over the next few years, the couple had 2 children, Max and Naomi. But now, Irving had joined forces with Betty's brother, John Sutherland, and poets Louis Dudek and Raymond Souster, and the little band set out to propel Canadian poetry out of the Victorian age, founding the literary journal First Statement and the publishing house, Contact Press. And one summer's day, having gone swimming in the St. Lawrence with Betty and some of his friends, Layton, who'd been struggling for some time to find his poetic voice, had an experience that he would never forget. He'd come back to the city in the late afternoon, gone out for a walk, and passed in front of a restaurant.
And I turned in to the restaurant. I sat down and I ordered a cup of coffee. And the waitress brought me a cup of coffee and left me a cup of coffee on the table. And all of a sudden, a delicious flow of images and a tremendous excitement. I called the waitress frantically. I grabbed the pencil out of her hand. I grabbed the napkin. And I wrote the poem, The Swimmer. But it's the way the thing happened. The excitement, the pell-mell rush of the images. In 5 minutes, the whole poem had written itself. And that's what convinced me that I was a poet. The afternoon before closing, see the swimmer plunges from his raft, opening the spray corollas by his act of war. Emerging, see how for a moment a brown weed with marvelous bulbs, he lies imminent upon the water. He dives, floats, goes under like a thief, where his blood sings to the tiger shadows in the scentless greenery that leads him home, and the last wave romping in to throw its boyhood on the marble sand. I knew that this was a memorable poem, and I knew that the experience that I had was an experience that only a poet has. Only a poet has.
The Swimmer was published in 1945, in Layton's first book, Here and Now. The poet was 33 years old. The book was essentially self-published, as would be all his books for the next decade, for a very simple reason.
In 1940, there was no Canadian publishing.
Howard Astor had Layton as a teacher at a time when he was still peddling his own books.
Irving started writing, in the 40s. What do you do? What do you do? There's no vehicle for publication. So the solution Irving came up with was, well, poetry. You just go out and you invest your own money and you get a printing press and you organize the printing and you get the people you know to commit to it. Betty Sutherland did the design for the early editions of Irving's works, and then there was Louis Dudek and Raymond Souster, and that really is the beginning of Canadian literary publishing. Irving was a pioneer in that. Irving and his friends were pioneers in that.
In the 1950s, Irving and Betty's house in the west of Montreal became a gathering place for their friends and fellow artists. It was a euphoric time.
Irving's most fertile period as a poet, most fertile period as a poet from the early 1950s to the mid-1950s. That period of his life is the time when he was living with Betty and had what seemed to be a normal family life with 2 kids, but it was the years he was with Betty, living out in Côte Saint-Luc on that house on the edge of Côte Saint-Luc on Kildare Road. That was his most fertile period of his life. And I would say that her presence, her feminine presence, her nurturing, her spirit, her open and free spirit, that probably helped free Irving. And he wrote his best poems, in my opinion, in those years.
And me happiest when I compose poems. Love, power, the huzzah of battle are something.
Through the 1950s, while supporting himself as a teacher, Layton brought out book after book. Within the small literary community, his reputation grew. But towards the end of this period, something began to happen. He turned up on CBC Radio and was discovered by a brand new medium, television. And with that, the Layton persona on the public stage began to assert itself.
Third member of the panel from Montreal, Mr. Irving Layton, teacher at the Herzliya High School, and author of the Improved Binoculars, a selection of his poetry. Tell me, Mr. Layton, do you think the day is coming closer when poets will be able to earn a living from their poetry in this country?
Well, I should think so. If you give them more programs like this, why not?
And when Irving was on, sparks flew, because Irving always said the outrageous thing, and he said it deliberately.
Truth has to be faced that Canadians, by and large, do not give 2 hoots about education. They will get far more stimulation out of tobacco and alcohol and hockey games than they will about intellectual or cultural issues.
So that when McClellan Stewart in 1959 published his first volume of collected poems, The Red Carpet for the Sun, he had a waiting audience. He was already in the news for 2-3 years.
For years, Layton had been campaigning in print against the ingrained Puritanism of Canadian society. Now he had a perfect forum where he could express his views.
There are 2 forces for me that I've always attacked. One of them is Philistinism, the other is Puritanism. Philistinism is that kind of mental contraction, the turning away mentally, spiritually from experience, and Puritanism is a turning away physically, bodily. Now, I want people to reach out with their minds as well as with their bodies into an experience that is larger than themselves.
A Red Carpet for the Sun achieved a success almost unprecedented in Canadian literary history for a book of verse. It launched Layton on a coast-to-coast reading tour, where he appeared on college campuses in front of packed halls. And as the 1960s got underway, it coincided with a whole new era in Canadian writing. His long years of struggle were paying off.
I don't think there was anyone since Bliss Carman's tour of Canada in the 1920s that so electrified poetry audiences in Canada, from Vancouver Island to the Maritimes. And he knew he was onto something good. And he loved being in the limelight.
Not once have I been disloyal to my wife. And you, I am told, are still a virgin. If you are set to barter your maidenhead for my unheard-of fidelity, call me between 3 and 5 tomorrow, and it is done.
My reading of it, that there was a kind of sexual awakening in Irving. I mean, as he began to move out in the Bohemian community, and he was then in his early 40s, he went to some kind of crisis, and when he met a very vivacious, beautiful, and intense young Australian Jewess who happened to be in Montreal, he flipped his lid.
Is Aviva Cantor and Irving Layton. Well, it's a sort of a strange team. I don't know you, Miss Cantor, but Mr. Layton is a well-known poet who was on our program a while back. How come you're writing songs now, Irving? How did you get them on disc?
Well, I went down to... I'm always hungry for this. You're the apple in my pie, you're the beans in my rye, you're the maraschino cherry in my drink, you're the bone in my rind.
For example, here's a poem that I wrote. You see, I keep on calling it a poem, but it isn't really a poem, called Baby Be My Satellite Tonight. Baby be my satellite tonight, beep, beep. Baby be my...
Aviva met Irving at a literary gathering at the poet's house. There, they exchanged views on Nietzsche, and the following day, went for a car ride.
We were out in the country. It was like a frozen tundra. My teeth were chattering, and all I was doing, really, with one part of my eyes, was to see whether there was a bush. And finally, I couldn't help it any longer, and I said, I have to pee. And I thought, oh God, how unromantic, because by this time I was beginning to get quite attracted to him, and I knew that he was then attracted to me. Anyway, I had to go out in this, must have been about 1,000 degrees below zero. There was only a tiny little bush, and I had to bare my ass, and I went down there and peed, and I thought, oh God, whatever mood there is in the car is completely ruined. By the time, it took no more than 2 seconds. By the time I came back into the car, Irving had written a poem. And it was called Anti-Romantic, and the first 2 lines I remember is, you went behind a bush to piss, imagine Wordsworth telling this. And I thought, this is a man who wrote a poem about my doing this, and I fell in love with him right there and then. So it was a combination of Nietzsche and a full bladder that brought us together. And I think, as Irving has said many times, the rest was hysteria. So that's how I met Irving, and the next day we became lovers. See her tomorrow.
Aviva still visits Irving whenever she's in Montreal, in the home for the elderly, where he now resides.
How old was I when I first met you?
I don't know.
I was 21.
No kidding.
And you were, 42?
Yeah?
We were both young and gorgeous. I thought Irving was a god. I thought, how do ordinary people live ordinary lives without somebody like Irving in their life? And I mean, this was so compelling. The wonderful thing about Irving is that his intellectual life, or his creative life, I should say, was so amazing and so inclusive. And this is what was incredible. Every single poem that Irving ever wrote, he would include me in. Unfortunately, even love poems to other women. He never said, he would make me learn every single poem off by heart. And if I didn't learn it off by heart fast, what it meant was that the poem wasn't good enough. he would ask me about rhythms, he would ask me about words, he would ask me about titles. I felt so much part of the creative process. I was the talking, walking book of Irving Layton's poetry. You say that to all the girls, Irv.
No.
You, oh, yes, you do.
I say that to you in a special way.
Fibber.
No.
Fibber.
No, I'm not a fibber. One thing I'm not is a fibber.
You're a confabulator.
That's better.
And if God looks away for 1 minute, does the world exist or not? Well, I know the answer to that because it doesn't. So Irving was totally focused on you, and you were a whole wonderful world. And then he would look away, let's say to another woman, and his focus that had been so heavily and laser-like intensity would go, and then I'd cease to exist.
Oh, yes. I think of those happy days
Me too.
and what happened to them.
Well, they're there in our memories.
What?
They're there.
They're still there?
Yeah, they're right behind our eyes.
Yeah?
I can see them when I look into your eyes.
Good.
Can you see them when you look
Yeah.
into mine?
Yeah. Hold on to them.
In 1959, Irving lost the most important person in his life. His beloved mother, Cana, passed away. Aviva Layton was present at one of the last meetings between mother and son.
One of my strongest memories of Irving and his mother was going to visit his mother in Noel People's home. In the middle of a conversation, she took Irving's hand and she opened her blouse and she put Irving's hand over her breast so that his hand was right on top of her breast. And it was an incredible moment. It was an incredible moment.
Layton was now an orphan. His mother was gone, but she would haunt him for the rest of his days. And in years to come, his powerful elegy, inspired by her death, would figure prominently in all his public readings.
When I saw my mother's head on the cold pillow, her white water-falling hair in the cheeks' hollows, I thought, quietly circling my grief, of how she had loved God, but cursed extravagantly his creatures. For her final mouth was not water, but a curse, a small black hole, a black rent in the universe, which damned the green earth, stars, and trees in its stillness, and the inescapable lousiness of growing old.
Now, for the first time, Layton was in a position to travel the world, and he and Aviva took full advantage of the opportunities. His poetic affinities drew him in particular to the Mediterranean, both Greece and Italy. Irving and Aviva had a child, David, and he often shared in their globetrotting. Aviva was Irving's partner, his mainstay, and his soulmate. But there were times when Irving strayed, and Aviva too went her own way, and the relationship finally came undone.
It was very, very hard when I left him. It was, God, was it painful.
When the breakup with Aviva, he came to San Francisco. Why me, I don't know. But he didn't tell me he broke up with her. But it wasn't hard to find out. I don't remember him ever saying to me, you know, Hyman, I'm so sick, I'm so sad. This happened to me, and I don't know what to do. Never.
Chaos in Layton's personal life could not keep him down for long. He was now an institution on the Canadian scene. Prolific as ever, he was bringing out a book a year. Too many for some, as his best work had to vie for attention with writing that was not always of the same caliber. But he still knew how to make an impression. In the 1970s, he launched a new, very public campaign with 2 books published in quick succession, For My Brother Jesus and The Covenant. There he spoke of Christian anti-Semitism's role in paving the way for the Holocaust, of the Jewish roots of Christianity, and what most got under the skin of the television audience of the day, of Jesus as a physical, human entity. Layton was in full flight once more, and primed for the last significant controversy of his career.
My latest epigram is that Christianity is Judaism with a nose job. You know, the Judaic origins of Christianity have been completely blotted out. And when you remind Christians that, after all, Jesus was a circumcised Jew like myself, that his mother, Mary, probably made gefilte fish and chicken soup for her son, Jesus, you know, that the whole mishpacha was a Jewish mishpacha, right? They are rather surprised. In the same way...
He knew that he was going to push his finger where people were going to start howling.
I really believe that the most serious theological question of our time is whether Jesus ever had an erection. And why should that not be discussed? If he was the perfect man, he must have had the perfect erection. Right?
But there were some who resisted Layton's charms. Here, the young Mary Lou Finley.
Are you a religious man?
A very religious man, not in any orthodox sense.
Do you go to the synagogue?
From time to time, just as I even go to church from time to time.
What church?
All churches. When I'm in Europe, I make a tour of the cathedrals and the churches. I love going to churches. I even meet a few Christians there from time to time. Chiefly in the graveyards, though.
One never knows how much of you is acting.
That may be your problem, it's not mine.
But it was Layton's problem too, of course. He would act out to draw attention to what he had to say, hoping that what he said would at the same time be taken seriously. For My Brother Jesus, the poem represents Layton at his best.
My father had terrible words for you. Whoreson, bastard, mishummet. And my mother loosed Yiddish curses on your name. In my family, you were a mamzer, a yoshka pundrik, and main reason for their affliction and pain. Oh, crucified poet, your agonized face haunts me as it did when I was a boy. I follow your strange figure through all the crooked passageways of history, the walls reverberating with ironic whisperings and cries, to lose you finally among your excited brethren, haranguing and haloing them with your words of love, your voice gentle as my father's.
In the 1970s, Irving forsook his beloved Montreal and moved to Toronto, an exile that would last over 10 years. He'd been offered a permanent teaching position at York University, something no Montreal university had been prepared to do. For Layton, teaching at York represented the last phase of a remarkable career as an educator that spanned almost 50 years. And his former students have never forgotten what it was like to have him at the front of the class.
It's the first day in Herzliya. He wrote 99.9999, and he said, you know what that means? 99.9999% of the human race is condemned to ignorance, to Philistinism, and only a small percentage. And he, of course, was going to be the Pied Piper who's going to lead us along the way to enlightenment.
As a teacher, always emphasized a kind of sensitivity to literature, but also he tried to imbue in his students a sense of toughness. There was that kind of very wonderful ambivalence in him between a deep, profound sensitivity towards words, towards ideas, towards literature, but at the same time that, given the nature of the world as it was, wrought with ideological conflict and wrought with pretty tough, murderous human beings around, you've got to take care of yourself physically.
Layton's concern with toughness did not come out of nowhere. In the early years, many of his students were refugees or Holocaust survivors. In 1948, Musha Schwartz was one of their number.
People who've come through so extraordinary an experience, whether you were in a concentration camp or you were running or you were hiding, it was something that people never even hear about in a lifetime, never mind experience. So we were interesting people, but we were not guinea pigs to him because of his compassion. he felt that this was a moment, a great moment for him to meet with people who have come from that sort of territory.
Even as Layton moved on in years, his impact as a teacher was undiminished.
It's actually the only time that I can ever recall meeting someone and being completely like blown off my feet.
In the late 1970s, as Irving's relationship with Aviva was sputtering to an end, Layton met a young student at York University by the name of Harriet Bernstein.
It was very difficult for him because he was, after all, still in a situation living with another person, and he was not, even though others would suggest it, an amoral man.
I remember Maclean's magazine had a big story when they got married. You saw, you know, this, what was he then, almost late 60s, lustily kissing his young bride, 30 years younger. Maclean's, I think, gave it the central spread in the issue that it came out, the old satyr with young nymph.
Irving and Harriet moved to a farmhouse in bucolic Niagara-on-the-Lake. But before long, once again, storm clouds appeared on the horizon.
In the classic sense, the thing that makes him be a tragic character, for all of his joy and exuberance and love of life, which was tremendous, there is this tragic element to him. There is this dark side. And I think that between the writer and the man, between what he wants and how he can actually be, there is a gap. There is not really a melding there. And although Irving wanted what he had, in a way he was almost, it's almost like someone who's doomed to foul their nest inexorably and not, almost like they can't help it. A writer will sometimes do things or allow things to happen just to see how the play unfolds and how people might feel, or some of the things that people in a marital type of relationship will be sensitive to for each other kind of fall by the wayside because, gee, maybe I'll get a poem out of this. If I get a poem out of it, then that's worth everything. There's kind of a playing with things in a certain way. And that's sad. That can be very sad.
The marriage was short-lived, and it ended badly, only 5 months after the birth of their child, Samantha. In the ensuing litigation, Layton lost access to his daughter and did not see her for many years. And one day, Samantha, now a young woman, picked up the phone and called her father.
He was very warm and receptive to the idea of her coming to visit him. And she went and saw him on her own. Kid's got moxie. And after she met him, I said, well, having met him now, do you understand more how I loved him? And she said, yes. And that was wonderful, you know. She also said that it was harder to say goodbye than to say hello. And given how hard it was to say hello, I think that quite says something.
Layton was alone again, but help was on the way in the guise of a young Acadian woman who came to call as an admirer and would remain as Irving's companion, lover, and support system for 14 years. It did not take her long to fall in love with the man behind the persona.
A quiet madman, never far from tears. That is exactly him. So when people would say, oh, he was a tub thumper and he was a self-promoter, no. A quiet madman, never far from tears. I take my Anna everywhere. She is so beautiful, she can break a man's heart with a look, with the proud thrust of her shoulder. I take my Anna everywhere. She has the unpitying gaze of a goddess. All the men who see her want to live their wrecked lives forever. It was magnificent. He was magnificent, and we were magnificent.
How long did it take before you got involved romantically?
Well, 3 days. It was as if we'd known each other forever. And it was...
How many years older than you was he?
48.
And that never gave you pause?
Not really, because the spirit had no age. I've spent about 20 years trying to figure out why it was that we bonded on such a molecular level. I wasn't deliberately disarming, it's just the way I am, and so he was able to feel completely free, and all his vulnerability could show with me, and it didn't matter, it was okay. And what was very clear for me was that I was going to help him in the harvesting stage of his career. It was going to be closing it down. And that's very awesome in every sense of the word. It's a very humbling kind of huge thing to assist in. Because if you see a child's first step, well, they have the next 80 odd years to do whatever. But when you see the last step or the last reading, the last poem, the last trip, it's very moving.
In one of his last unfinished poems, an invocation to the muse who had abandoned him, Layton wrote, "You gone, my scribbles are pale as a watermark. No fire in them, no punch. Return, make my brain boil again." But it was not to be.
He would have little notes, little scribbles next to him. He would always have a pad. He was always like a scribbler, a notebook, and a pen, always. And he would start, and he would try. And I could see, and I'd read them, and it was quite poignant. He was still trying. The impulse was there, the desire was still there, but he knew it was leaving him. Because to have continued to stay on with him would have been destructive for him as well as for me. Everything that I had given him, which was my youth, my energy, my mind, everything that I had given him, I could no longer give. I had nothing left to give. I had less than nothing, and I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't. So we became like an arthritic knee joint. Any contact became excruciating. And it was just, as I say, becoming destructive for him and for myself. And he helped me to leave him. That's the measure.
How?
He told me, he said, it's not fair. He said, I've had you all to myself all these years. And you have to start your own life. You have to. So he helped me to leave him. He encouraged me when it became time to look for an apartment, and he would open the window. The first few times when it began to become clear there was no other way, he would sort of open the window and kind of close it back down on me. But then, because he needed me, that was when he needed me the most. And the guilt that I felt was indescribable.
In time, Layton took up residence in the Maimonides Home for the Aged, only a few blocks from the house where he'd lived with Betty Sutherland in the 1950s and written some of his greatest poems.
It's also important because, along with Klein, he came from a minority group, wrote to a good degree out of the attitudes of his group, and helped liberate the literature so that writers from many other ethnic communities and other backgrounds could also write with a sense of independence and freedom.
Not everything he wrote will live, nobody's does. But he will live as a poet, I'm sure, because he is an honest poet and a strong one.
As an ordinary immortal, I realized he was no eagle. He did as many stupid things as most of us, if not more sometimes. But when he got on this thing where dictation from the angels, that was real. That was very genuine. And that admiration never waned. Never.
By walking, I found out where I was going. By intensely hating, how to love. By loving, whom and what to love. By breathing, how to laugh from the belly. Out of infirmity, I have built strength. Out of untruth, truth. From hypocrisy, I weave directness. Almost now I know who I am. Almost I have the boldness to be that man. Another step, and I shall be where I started from.